of water supply. I therefore commend this bill to the House.
I call Mark Patterson.
Mr Speaker, it is with great pleasure that I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to support this Tasman District Council Waimea Augmentation Scheme bill. And as we know, this is actually quite a technical bill and at its core. It's the 9.7 hectares of the Mount Richmond Forest Park and the 1.3 hectares of Lynn's riverbed being transferred from the Crown basically through to the Tasman District Council for easement and for reservoir. So that's the core of what we're doing, but of course it's much bigger than this. This is enabling legislation for a significant piece of infrastructure for the Tasman region. And I note that this has been 20 years in the making, and I can only just imagine what that was like to the farming leaders. And I note Julian Rain in the building, and I'm sure many others that are not so well known to me, but Julian, of course, is a very prominent in agribusiness circles. But those discussions, I'm sure, happened in the pack houses and initially, and you know, on market day or whatever might have been the meeting places of those growers back in the day. And from that, and herding those cats from those small conversations to get to this point where we're in the Parliament of New Zealand enabling this piece of legislation that will allow a dam to be built on the Waimea River. Of course, irrigation is a fairly emotive topic, Mr Speaker, but it is time we had a more sensible discussion about irrigation in this country. This is a water-rich country. We don't have to look far across the ditch to our neighbours. They would be absolutely, they could not dream of having the wealth of resources, water resources that we have. And the discussion has got, the debate has got very narrow around water equals cows equals pollution. It does not, and this particular scheme, proposed scheme, absolutely proves this. The 1,200 or so hectares that are to be irrigated under this is primarily horticultural land. I think there is only about 2 dairy farms. One of the things I learnt on the way through with this bill is that boysenberries are one of the main crops here, and that New Zealand actually produces 60% of the world's boysenberries, and a good proportion of those are in this Waimea plain, and that's something to be very proud of for those farmers. So we certainly get that, you know, we need to do better with the nutrient budgeting, and I note today we had a significant report on the overseer model. We are working hard as a government and I'm sure as a parliament to bring the tools together so that we can have irrigation and we can still have a pristine environment as well. Of course, it's not just the rural users, it's of course the urban users, and both domestic and industrial, and there's some significant large employers within that Nelson Tasman region who will benefit in the security of water from this scheme when it is up and running. As Dr Smith outlined in his contribution, this is a fast-growing urban population. It's a wonderful part of the world and will continue to grow at pace. So we're future-proofing not only the farmland but also our urban and industrial users. And of course there is the environmental benefits. Having the water flowing consistently and being able to have some control over that is a real benefit. And we note that the biodiversity offsets that have been negotiated as part of this, so I think that's really visionary and leading stuff, and the sort of thing that we probably look to be doing in the future. I think this is a good exemplar. The Crown, of course, is extending a loan of $35 million to the farmers, or to the scheme, to the farmers involved in the scheme, and I would like to emphasise that it's a loan. It will be paid back. It's not a grant. It is a loan, and the farmers, this is a multi-generational decision for them, and they will recompense the Crown many times over with their lift in production, but also with the interest bearing on the loan. Of course, there is a $7 million grant, and that was part of a freshwater grant under the previous Crown Irrigation Limited. I note with some irony the opposition are now quite vehement in their opposition to the Provincial Growth Fund, but this is exactly the same principle at play here. Wise investment in the regions, enabling significant infrastructure. I also would like to commend the tenacity and the vision of the local political leaders, and I note Mayor Kempthorne here today. This has been a contentious issue. We're aware of that. There has been, well, one of the votes did go against the dam. There was a lot of leadership, I would imagine, involved in bringing that together. I note some of the regional leaders here today, and I commend you on that. It is not easy sometimes to step back and look at the bigger picture when you have your ratepayers, many of whom are on fixed incomes, and for them any increase in their rates is, is something that it can't be trivialised. But you have to step back, look at the bigger picture. I think some of the rates rises are somewhere between $29 and $150 per annum. Even at the top end of that, that's $3 a week to secure this very important future-proofing piece of infrastructure for this region. This is about a 100-year vision. This is not about what the rates bill will be necessarily next year. And I believe that those political leaders will be remembered fondly in the future for the leadership they have shown. Of course, the economics of this were pretty well set out. There was, I believe, the Northington report that showed that over 25 years this could add $935 million to the Tasman Nelson economy. That is a significant increase, and of course it's the security of that income too. And for the $103 million, I think it is now, it might even be $105 that the scheme costs, I think up front, that will pay dividends year after year. So finally, Mr Speaker, I'd just like to commend the member, Dr Smith, the local MP for Nelson, for bringing this bill forward, shepherding it through. It will be a bit of a legacy for you, I think, in your region that you have been able to do this. I commend the Select Committee. I know they engaged and went down to Nelson to hear the submissions. The officials, as always, were very well served in this House. This is a really good, sensible piece of legislation to enable a very important piece of infrastructure in New Zealand First. I'm delighted to support this through to the third reading. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I call Brett Hudson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's an absolute delight to rise and support